from Mr. Smith, the Director of Municipal Works. If you do have questions for Mr. Smith, if you can use the Q button and get yourself into the speakers list. Once the presentation is done, I'll start working my way through that and we'll try and use the system without screwing anything up. Mr. Smith, item 3.2, discussing service levels.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You can make it simple and just not allow.
That would be nicer for all of us, but.
So this is my first time using this in quite a while, so hopefully I won't make too many mistakes. So good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and public. Over this term of council, there's going to be significant discussions around levels of service, service levels, and asset management. This presentation is to provide council with some information on what service levels are, how are they determined, and its impact on the budget. No doubt, to some of you, this will be fairly obvious, and some of you may have already gone through some sort of presentation on this previously. This is not meant to be a very in-depth presentation, just sort of an overview. Really, my goal at the end of this is that we're all speaking the same language. So when we talk about a level of service versus a service level versus asset management, we all have the same understanding of what we are talking about. Also, this presentation is being made from a municipal works perspective, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that we don't deliver services without the assistance, cooperation, and support of all the other departments within the city. Well, it actually worked. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about some definitions, again, getting back so we're talking about the same language. We're going to talk about a level of service continuum, about some transitions that we would like to bring in going forward. We're going to do an example about determining a service level, fairly straightforward, simple example. And then we're going to talk about sort of the big picture and how it relates. So let's start off with some definitions. Levels of service and service levels are often used interchangeably, but they are two very different things. And you can leave it to engineers and accountants to try to confuse everybody. So think of level of service as the asset management or the city perspective. What is the service life of that asset going to be? How long is it going to be before we have to replace it? Those types of discussions. For a service level, think about that as coming from the public's perspective. Is that asset ready for me to use? Is it reliable? If you think about it, the public may not care that there may be micro cracks in a concrete sewer as long as they can flush their toilet. But we from an asset management perspective would care because it impacts the service life of that asset. The goal for municipal works, of course, is to have an operational work plan that addresses both the level of service of asset management and the expectations of the public through service levels. Two more definitions to add to the mix is a service need versus a service want. Now, a service need comes around from regulations or public health or risk management. A prime example of that would be what just happened with the West St. Paul's Bridge. They had to lower the weight limit for that bridge of vehicles crossing it. That would be a regulatory service level because that factor of safety is defined through regulation through the province. A service want is more about an expectation of delivery of service, like picking up garbage or cutting grass. Both needs and wants are important. However, I should be very clear that if there's a budget crunch, if we're coming to the end of the year, and it comes down to choosing between a service want and a service need, the service need is going to win out because of that regulatory risk management, public health portion of that. But again, that's not to say we don't deal with service wants, because service wants are what the public expects. And service wants can actually turn into service needs. For instance, if the city decided to stop picking up litter, it wouldn't take long for that to start having public health issues with rotting garbage all around the city. So that very quickly becomes a service need. So let's talk about a level of service continuum. I know there's a lot of information on this slide, and when I was putting this presentation together, with service levels, you can either sort of stay up here and skim the surface or go down here for 4, 5, 6 hours, and nobody, including my own wife, wants to hear me speak for 5 or 6 hours. So I'm going to stay up here. In theory, service levels can fall anywhere on this continuum. You can be completely budget reactive service level where you have no planned work. It's sort of, here's your bag of money, go do what you can do with this money, and that's it. To the very other end of the spectrum, where there is no budget limit. We have a completely proactive plan. There's no breaks because our Cadillac service of maintenance just takes care of everything, so nothing ever breaks, and we never have to worry about it. The reality of the situation is no organization lives at either end. We're all somewhere in the middle, because no matter what the budget limitation is, there's always some work we know we have to do. And regardless of how much budget we have, we know it's not limitless. So there's always going to be a cap on service somehow. The goal for us, for the City of St. Catharines, is to move away from the reactionary model, the budget-based model, to more proactive model based on service needs and asset management, maintenance of our assets. So we can extend the life of sewers, extend the life of roads, so that we get the full capital investment out of that asset. When staff bring a report on setting service levels, we try to balance all of these things: customer needs and wants, the asset needs, and of course, risk management. So, bottom line, where are we now? In a nutshell, St. Catharines is about 85% reactive in our budget. That is why we're there. We won't get into that. There's a long history as to why we're there, but that's where we're at. And at that level, to be perfectly honest, what we are doing for the most part, you can think about it as keeping the lights on and keeping the pipes from freezing. We're making sure things are running. We're making sure people have clean water. We're making sure you can dry the roads, but we're not doing much more than that. Where we want to get to, what we want to try to transition to, is to where we get to about 65% proactive. That's a very solid base of proactive work. It starts extending, getting into the asset management work for extending the life of asset, as well as help with the controlling the breaks, delivering a more reliable system, having more reliable infrastructure available for the public. And to be perfectly honest, just a quick point, it's, as I stated before, it's not realistic to try to get to the 100% proactive approach. That's not financially sustainable in any way, shape, or form by any municipality, not just St. Catharines. And it's not even that. You wouldn't be able to find the resources you need to actually put that kind of a work program in place. There are benefits besides the obvious ones to a more reliable infrastructure that comes out of a proactive method. And that's budgets can be better forecasted and controlled because we have a work plan. We know what we're going to face. We can start impacting the unknowns, which are the breaks and the things, the sewers being plugged and things like that. So I'm going to just give a little example. So say we start, for purposes of this discussion, a robust proactive valve maintenance program. Over time, we can expect that the number of broken valves that we encounter in the system would go down. and there would be a reduction in need to have resources to go and repair those valves. But here's the issue. It can take years to realize the benefits of a proactive system. Years before that reduction in the breaks and reactive work start to show, and we can start adjusting our resources. So what it means in the interim, if we want to get there, we have to find ways to fund that gap so we can start doing the proactive work while maintaining the reactionary work. So what will that take? Well, we're going to be asking for incremental increases in operating budget to help assist that way. We're going to be asking council to re-examine community wants versus needs. We're going to be asking council to consider user fees for wants and focus rates on needs. And we're going to ask council to allow us to get out of some of the businesses we shouldn't be in. For instance, installing new service laterals. These are the only ways that we can see where we can garner some resources to start making that transition from being a reactive operational group to a proactive operational group. So now, for the second part, I'd like to do a very simple little example. Council has asked us to consider cutting grass that we've never cut before, some open space grass that we've never cut before. Well, what do we do first? Well, the first thing we do, obviously, is we compile an inventory. We can't tell you what it's going to cost if we don't know what we have to do. So we go out and we look and we check. And for this example, we said there's 20 square kilometers of grass, there's 10 sites, and the average distance between the sites is 5 kilometers apart. So right off the bat, that tells us that we're going to have to be transporting equipment, whether it's on trailer or equipment that can drive on the road for itself, between these sites to do the work. What's the next thing we have to do? We have to decide on the frequency. Is this a cut that we need to do once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month? Again, that's going to determine the amount of resources that you need to do this work. And not particularly in this example, but for some things when we consider service levels, we have to consider whether it's something that we have no choice in the time of when we deliver, or something we can schedule. For instance, a snowstorm. We don't know when a snowstorm is going to hit. We can't plan to be plowing snow next Tuesday. So what we do is we plan how we do the work, and we use our history that we've gone through over years to develop that budget. But it's not something that you go, well, we know we're going to be plowing snow 16 times a year. We don't. But we build a budget anyway around that. Then once we do that, we determine what's required to deliver that, to meet that service. Equipment, personnel, materials. We also look at the service model. Are contractors available? Is it something we want to do in-house? If we determine that it's an in-house operation, generally speaking, there will be an impact to both the operating and the capital budget. Then we take all of that information, we put the overlay on it of what we talked about earlier, being customer wants, asset management needs, risk management, and regulatory compliance. Put that lens on it, package it together, hopefully for a nice, neat report to council that makes sense. So again, we just drew this up for this little example. In this one, and of course these numbers aren't real, we just sort of picked them out of the air. In this one, you'll see to do the work, we estimated that we were going to need 15 additional staff. We were going to need 5,000 liters of diesel fuel, 1,200 liters of colored diesel fuel, unleaded fuel, a push mower, a trimmer, and then down below you see some capital investments. We're going to need another land pride, we're going to need a crew cab, and we're going to need a trailer. So smaller equipment like push mowers and trimmers are taken care of in the operating budget. They aren't a capital purchase. The larger equipment would obviously be in the capital budget. In general, the capital would be a one-time investment, though there are equipment replacements, but that's handled through the budget ongoing. and the operating would be an annual cost. I would like to make another point in here that really doesn't talk about service levels, but it will be relevant when we get into this for real. When we want to do something now, the lag time between ordering a piece of equipment and getting a piece of equipment delivered is substantial. For a fire truck or one of our large plow trucks, you're probably looking 2 to 3 years from the day we order it to when it's delivered. So we have to take that into consideration when we do that work. Also, you know, there is, if you got to hire staff, there's a hiring process you have to go through. So you get into it, when we bring these reports to council, we're going to put right in the reports, if council wants to implement this, we are going to need 6 months or 8 months or 12 months. So this will be implemented for 2024, something along those lines, to try to address some of those impacts. So let's take it back and sort of talk a little bit about big picture. That was a very simple example of a service level calculation. In municipal works, there's 2 front-facing service divisions, and there's 4 operational units within each division. And we literally conduct over 100 different activities, and we have service level discussions and service level discussions and service levels for each and every one of these activities. I'm not going to bore you by reading through the whole list, but that's the list. And every time that we are asked to do another service level discussion, we have to examine, can we do it within what we've got there now? Do we have to add to it? All of those things are taken into consideration. So how do service levels impact all of us? If I haven't made it clear before this point, I will like to make it clear now. Data drives everything. Data drives how we deliver our service, how we plan to deliver our service, how we budget for our service. And not only that, it gives us the information to all the stakeholders. Now, this is just the internal and regulatory stakeholders that are listed here. This is not the public. But how all the stakeholders get their information as well. From council, so you need to know what service level is being provided and when. Right down through to courts, you know, when we are in front of a court because a claim filed against us, it's not what we've done, it's what we can prove that we've done, and how we prove that is by having robust data. The work managers need the data to track staff, to plan the work, material, equipment, and all of that. Asset managers need the data to know the status of our assets. And financial managers need the data to have stable projections of our asset management costs. You've heard me speak about this before at our initial orientation session. The city right now is basically paper-based. Or a computer spreadsheet, and for all intents and purposes, that's paper-based as well. We are constantly trying to find ways to mine data through out of that system. Our current work management system is 24 years old and counting, and I think I said this at our orientation, just think of how many updates you got on the apps on your phone in the last 6 months, let alone the last 24 years. We are working through with IT and other departments, finance, on a new asset resource management system. There is a report to council on January 16th that will talk about the next steps about that as the RFP gets ready to go out. So all this comes together, the planning of the work, the doing of the work, the data on the work, the reporting on the work. All this comes together to help us deliver the services to the residents of the city of St. Catharines. And this work, this basic work here, is the foundation of everything that the city does. This foundation allows the city to then strive towards councilors' more strategic goals, the higher order goals that are in the strategic plan now about being the best city to live and raise a family in. Without this foundation being properly in place, it's hard to achieve those other goals. So I want to thank you for your time tonight. I hope I didn't go too fast or too slow, and I would be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. That was a great presentation. Again, I'll just ask councilors to use the buttons. I see Councilor Kushner is up first, followed by Councilor Williamson. Councilor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You indicated that you'd like to transition from 15% to 65% proactive. How'd you come up with that 65%?
Excuse me. And that's based on best management practices through other municipalities. So when we look at what municipalities that are doing really well at this, where they're at, that's about where they're at, is the 65%.
Okay, is there an actuarial estimate of how high you should go to reduce your cost?
I'll have to follow up on that. I'll have to look into that.
And with respect to service levels, you indicate we're middle of packed, and yet whenever we have a snowstorm, we're told that Thorold does a better job than we do. Is that fact or fiction?
So there's two discussions to be had around service levels. If you look at our history of responding to snow events, about 95% of the time we meet our service levels. So what that means to me from the public is, it's not that we're not meeting our service levels, is that the public doesn't like the service level that we have. And so regardless of whether we meet it or not, if the public doesn't like our base service level, then that's going to raise complaints every single time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilor Kushner. Councilor Williamson. 1 second. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the director. You mentioned about some services that we may not want to be in anymore. That's probably going to be a hard one to sell to certain community members. I just wonder if you could elaborate a little bit with maybe not talking too much. You mentioned sewer laterals.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we're going to have to take a hard look at the golf course. I know that discussion is not a happy discussion to have, but that's one of the ones I think we need to take a hard look at. I think also we need to look at some of the services we provide that, like setting up chairs for events. Is that the best use of staff time to take staff away and hauling chairs and picnic tables all over the city to set things up for events? So things like that. None of those things is going to be a big pot of gold, but collectively together, if we can actually free up some resources and put it towards some other higher value work, that's a start.
Okay, and then this, Councillor Kushner talked about it, the balance between reactive and proactive. And I don't know. My experience has been, and you're always going to have issues and not disasters, but many disasters in neighborhoods for local residents if there's a sewer clog, that kind of thing. It's something that we do a great job at that, as far as I can tell. I mean, we must stack up pretty well against other municipalities in terms of response time when there's a crisis that happens, generally speaking. Would you?
Yes, we do. We react well to situations and we deal with them well. We're trying to get it to the point where we don't have to react as often to these situations.
Right. Is there any particular areas, like, I don't mean to dwell on sewer clogs, but I've had one recently, so it comes to mind. And okay, just to follow up on that, is there, if we improve services, if we get cameras, remote cameras down sewers and water mains, do we do water mains? I don't know with cameras or not. But is there potential savings for homeowners, residents, in terms of reduced homeowners insurance, and then reduced risk of having backups in their basements and that kind of things?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure about insurance because it doesn't seem to, no matter what you do, insurance always seems to go up. However, I will say this, absolutely 100% I can guarantee, if we shift to a proactive service model delivery, our assets will be more reliable. They will be able to act at the most efficient they can. So let's talk, a few years ago we had that North End storm, terrible storm. There's no sewer that we're going to build that's going to handle that amount of water that came down in that storm. It's just not possible. But what you need to do is make sure what you have in place is operating at 100% efficiency, because that will then minimize the backups, minimize the flooding, and minimize the damage. That's where we want to get to. There's going to be a whole asset management discussion with Anthony and his group about things we should be doing from a design perspective and separating sewers and things like that. That will help the situation, but from a strictly maintenance perspective, we want to make sure what's in the ground right now is operating as efficient as it possibly can.
Okay, and is technology, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, technology, improvements in technology making it less expensive to be able to do some of these intrusive or investigative procedures?
For you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So the ability to TV, there's Zoom TV now, which gives us a cheaper alternative than a full CCTV scan of sewers. There's leak detection on water mains. There's a whole bunch of technology available. I think what we need to be prepared for, though, and I don't want to try, I'm not trying to give sticker shock here, is we don't know what we don't know. And we start putting TVs through sewers, we're going to find some that we're going to have to deal with. And we need to be prepared for that, because having been through this before, once you start down that path of gathering the information, sometimes it's quite the shock, the information that you get.
And then just one last, Mr. Mayor, follow-up. Are there model municipalities that are at that optimal, proactive level that we're gearing towards?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are municipalities that do it better than us. I don't think there's anyone that's at the optimal level. It's more difficult, too, as an older municipality, because we have things that were built here long before the current standards were ever in place. And, that's more difficult to maintain and keep operating than a brand-new city. So, not to go to Mississauga, but Mississauga, for the most part, is a new city, completely. When you're starting with a clean slate and putting new stuff in, that's easier to set up a program and maintain than when, you have a drawings that are 110 years old and you're not sure they're exactly showing what needs to be found, and you put a shovel in the ground, you never know what you're going to find. And so that's a real concern when we get through that.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. We'll go to Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yeah. Hey, Daryl. Thanks for your presentation to the mayor. I'm new here, and we were given a book. I can't even remember the title of the book, but I started reading it. One of the things it talks about a little bit is about keeping services in-house versus contracting out. And you mentioned that, and you also mentioned businesses we might not want to be in anymore. I'm assuming those are two different things.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and so I guess my question is, maybe how are they different? Could you give us some examples? And do they align with things we need to do and things that we want to do? If that question makes any sense. I mean, it's not, I'm sure you have to go case by case to give a really great answer to that, but I'm just curious, how would you answer that in a more general way?
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So how we deliver the service is completely different than if we should be delivering the service. So we should answer the if question first. So whatever, the golf course is an if question. Should we actually be delivering that service? The installing water service, new water services or new sewer laterals, should we be doing that business? Then once you make that decision, then you have the discussion about, okay, how do we do those things that we should be doing? And we have a responsibility to look at all delivery options. There are pluses and minuses to both options, in-house and contractor. There is a benefit to having in-house services. And, you know, most of what we deliver now, we deliver in-house with assistance from contractors. But we also have a responsibility to look at that because of the budget crunch, and it is a budget crunch, and it's every year we have discussions around budget. We have a responsibility to look at the most efficient way and decide whether the trade-offs make it worthwhile to go one way or the other. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I guess the follow-up question would be, like, the golf course is something that will come in front of council. Going in-house, going out-of-house, like, how is council made aware of those decisions? What kind of input should we expect to have? You know, I don't want to be micromanaging, but I also am curious. I just want to know kind of my role in the process of making those decisions.
Excuse off button. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there are articles in the collective bargaining agreement that govern contracting out services. And if we are to consider contracting out a service, there is a process that we follow. So we go through that service. As part of that process, there is the opportunity for the union to get information to council on, we'll call it their side. We try to consider that when we're doing the review and doing that discussion. The actual in or out is something that's done through the management. It's not something that normally would be in front of council, per se, because it's, again, we're trying to find the most efficient way to deliver the service. Council gives us the direction to deliver that service, and that's what we try to do.
All right. That's the same for being in and out of a business and contracting or keeping it in-house? I'm assuming it's different.
Mr. Mayor, so should we be in the business or out of the business, that is absolutely a council decision that will be brought in front of council and say, council, we're recommending that we're not going to do these businesses anymore.
Right, okay. That's helpful, thanks.
All right, we'll go to Councillor Miller next.
Thank you. Thanks, Darrell. Thanks for bringing up the golf course. I'm sure I already have a number of emails about that, probably from former Councillor Porter. I'm just curious, what was the impetus for having the discussion tonight? It's kind of unusual.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is something that I wanted to have a chance to present to council to, again, to make sure we're talking the same language, whether Municipal Works is bringing a report to council or EFS is bringing a report to council. And this was a time slot that could fit me in. So this is why I'm here tonight.
Okay, fair enough. Just with regards to service level and levels of service, where does service quality factor in? Is that in service levels of service? Because I think, and Councillor asked a couple questions I would ask, but we've seen locally, I think when it comes to snow plows and regionally when it comes to waste management, that when we contract out service, the quality of service goes down, and that's when we hear from residents more often than not. So how does that play into the decision-making?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So quality of service comes into the service level discussion. So the expectation from the public and the discussion around that. So again, whichever service delivery model that you have, whether it's in-house, contracted out, or a combination of the two, it requires the proper resources to manage that. And generally speaking, it's been assumed that if you just contract it out, you walk away from it, you wash your hands of it, and it's all done. And that's where you get into problems if you contract out that service. If you contract out the service, you have to manage the contractor. And you have to make sure that the contract has robust clauses in there that allow for penalties to the contractor if they're not doing their job. You have to be very clear in the contract of what you expect the contractor to do. And all of that has to be taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Just with regards to, I think everyone would be in favor of moving to the proactive model. How does that, my red flag obviously is talking about outsourcing some of our services. So how do those two things relate? How does outsourcing services help us be more proactive, I guess is my question.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the outsourcing of services is, you have to compare the cost. So it's budget-driven, obviously, and for any given level of service, if the cost to do it contractually is substantially lower, that means that for the same money, we can get more work done, which allows us to address some of those needs that happen, some of the reactive measures, while reallocating the resources that we have towards the proactive measures.
Okay, I guess issue maybe with this process, and I know Councilor Ratzlaff asked about it, is it seems to be very budget-driven. It just seems like if there is something like a budget crunch or we're underfunding operational services currently, or we need to get more for our money or whatever it is, that should be coming to council and we should be voting. Like ultimately, we should be accountable and say, yeah, we're cutting the budget to this department, so we have to outsource it. It concerns me maybe that staff would be forced into making that decision on their own because we've set an inadequate budget, I guess.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So those are discussions that we have during budget time. So we bring a budget forward. We'll be very clear what we've included and not included in the budget. Going forward, we are going to be making requests and changes and recommendations, and that will have both positive and negative impacts to the budget. When we bring the service level discussion in front of you, so we try, it's not the way people think about it naturally, but we try to separate the service level discussion from the budget discussion somewhat to address that quality of life that you're talking about. So this is what we want to deliver. Is this what you want to deliver, council? Is this the level of service that you want? If the answer is yes to that, then we go away and we say, here's the cost to deliver that service. And at that time, if we come back and say, okay, councilor, it's going to cost $1.5 million to do this, and council may say, well, no, we want you to find a way to do it for one, or what can you give us for $750,000? Those can be the discussions that can happen at that time.
Okay, yeah, and that's fair, and I hope that is the discussion that happens at budget time that we get, because I think we have generally recognized it's better to have in-house services for that control and that accountability, which I understand maybe you'd be able to contract, but because, we talked a lot about things like living wage and stuff and how that's better for the city to have more people who are making more money and living in the city and working in the city. So it goes beyond just the dollars and cents of it. So I guess my hope is that when every department, not just yours, is preparing their budgets, that they are asking for what they need, right? Rather than maybe compromise, and then we can make the tough decision or whatever about reducing the budget. So yeah, anyway, I guess that's a process thing, but okay. Yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Going now to Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, the system question, to the mayor, does your screen show you the sequence of when we press the button? Yeah. All right. Through you to Director Smith, you mentioned that one of the ways to move in this transition would be to increase the operating budget. Have you got any estimates of what kind of an increase you're talking about, or are you talking about an increase in the 2024 budget, or what happens here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what we're talking about here is 2024, because what we are going to do in 2023 is bring the service level discussions in front of council first. So we're going to establish with this council, what service do you want to deliver? And then we'll take that away and figure out the budget for doing that and put that in the discussion for the 2024 budget. There are some minor increases in the 2023 budget, which I think you've all seen around, some health and safety issues and some service delivery issues that are in the budget, but this bigger picture discussion has to have the service level discussion in front of council first, which hence why I'm here tonight.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, when you do that for the 2024 budget, are you going to do a multi-year projection? Because obviously, it's not going to happen in 1 year, right? So you're going to be looking at multiple years and some kind of an estimate of what kind of increases in costs we're looking at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, of course. Well, we work that through with the other departments and budgeting, and we realize that this is not something where you flick the switch and next year we're proactive. This is a process. My original estimate, and I will just say it's my original estimate, is it's a 5-year process. Based on what comes out of the service level discussions, that may increase or decrease. Because realistically speaking, we're not going to be coming in front of council and say, okay, council, we're asking for a 15% increase to do this or do that. It makes sense to phase this in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I've got Councillor McPherson next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Daryl. And you may have just answered the question, but just to get to that 35, 65, how long would that take?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I estimate 5 years.
Okay. That's it. Thanks, Daryl.
All right, I have nobody else on the speakers list. Are there any other questions or comments? Any summary comments? Mr. Smith, thank you very much for the presentation today. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the presentation? Councilor Miller, Councilor Stevens. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We're on to the final item of business, which is the bylaws motion, bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held on the 9th day of January 2023. Mover and a seconder, Councilor Phillips, Councilor McPherson. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then finally, a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Councilor Dodge, Councilor Ratzlaff. All those in favor? Opposed? We are out of here.